Hello, and welcome to the Weekly Scroll podcast brought to you by the Adventure Archive. My name is Ryan, and with me today we have John Hambone McGuire of 321 Action RPG, which we're going to be talking about later tonight. How are you doing, John?
I'm doing great, man. I'm doing great. Well, one of my dearest friends is turning 40, so she decided to throw a prom for her 40th birthday party. So I'm going to a prom tonight, of all
Okay.
things, but like a prom for adults. So it's pretty good. Pretty,
I
pretty
didn't
pumped.
go to I didn't go to high school prom, so I don't know what prom for adults would be like. So,
No one's gonna get popped for drinking.
well, there
No
you go.
one's trying to spike the punch. The playlist is going to be infinitely better. No one's renting a limo. People are calling Ubers. It's the modern world, as it were.
There we go. So John Hambone McGuire, where does Hambone come from? And do you prefer to be called John Hambone? Where are we at with that?
Well, how blue can we work on the show? If you want to know where Hambone came from, yeah, whatever. You know what? It's interesting because I've been Hambone since I was 20, 21. There's been various different versions of Hambone and incarnations. It's almost like a pro wrestler gimmick where like over time you get like four versions of the Undertaker. Um, but yeah, man, like all my friends know me as Hambone. I try to get away from it a little bit, but it's like Banner and the Hulk. You're tied together forever. So yeah, you can call me John,
Yeah,
you can call me Hambone. I'm pretty easy.
gotcha. So for those that potentially might not know who John Hambone McGuire is, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
So I am a game designer, game writer, podcaster, musician. I've been a musician my entire life, pretty much. I'm 43. I know I'm 28. Thank you for noticing. But yeah, I mean, I've been in various different forms of the entertainment business, the bar industry, restaurant business, and currently I am the co-creator and co-writer of 321 Action. I'm the bass player of a band called Secret Country, and I am the co-host and producer of the Vintage RPG podcast.
There we go. That's a lot. You've been doing it for a while then, huh?
Yeah, I've had my toe in the water of a lot of different things over the last 20 or 30 years. So I've been around.
So in the scope of all of that, when did Teach RPGs kind of enter the fray, and then especially getting into like the Teach RPG podcasting and all of that kind of stuff?
So the vintage RPG, so to bring it back a little bit, I've been playing RPGs since I was 25. I got in there late because I got invited to play Dungeons and Dragons. It was 1997, I think. And my girlfriend at the time told me it was either D&D or her, and I was like, because she didn't want her friends to know she was dating a nerd. And at that point, I was like, "Oh, I love her," and so I didn't play. I didn't play for a good number of years afterwards, but then I started playing, and I completely fell in love with Dungeons and Dragons. I fell in love with RPGs. I fell in love with games, and it's something that I kind of felt was like the missing part of me for a good portion of my life. And the person who was my dungeon master was now I guess one of my oldest and dearest friends, Stu Horvath, who is Vintage RPG.
Right.
And Stu and I mean, we knew each other because we had a lot of mutual friends in the music scene. And Stu and I actually used to work at a record store together around the block from where we both still live, called St. Mark's Records. And, you know, that's just kind of how we knew each other from just being around. And we been playing D&D together for years. He started up the Vintage RPG Instagram, and out of that, after he did that for he did that for about a year. I was producing a lot of different podcasts for several different people. I just wrapped up the Mai Tai Happy Hour podcast, which I did for 6 years with my best pal GLK, and I helped Seltzer Squad get off the ground. When they first started, I was working with a bunch of different things and consulting on different podcasts. And I was like, Stu, you should turn this into a podcast. Just turn the Instagram feed into a podcast. People would really love that. And he's like, I don't know. But I made him do it. We recorded like 4 pilots till we figured out the formula. And even then, the formula fully evolved over the course of a year. But he's been doing the Vintage RPG Instagram for 5 years. We've been doing the podcast for 4. He just wrapped the production on his book that MIT Press is going to be releasing called Monsters, Aliens, and Holes in the Ground, which is just the history of RPGs. It's not just D&D. Like, he talks about, like every kind of RPG under the sun, he talks about. He talks with the creators of these RPGs, does interviews, and just, it's a really great book, and it's coming out next October, I think, from MIT Press. So he literally wrote the book on RPGs, which is, it's kind of fun. So started doing that, having a blast doing that. We've got a killer community built around the podcast and around the Instagram on our Discord, which is cool. So it's kind of like, when we jumped on the air before, we were talking about how, we just, social media is just a lot, but like having a Discord community, and I know, because you have a Discord community,
Right.
it's kind of like the island, a safe island where you can go to and you can just talk about the things you want to talk about and not have to just go into all of that.
Right.
So
Right. So then, and one of the things we're talking about is 3-2-1 Action, which is your game, and that came out it was 2021, right?
Yeah, 2021.
So what, in the course of like you said, with the podcast over the last 4 or 5 years, with all of that, and getting kind of deeper into the TTRPG scene, at what point where you're like, I'm gonna make a game, and this is going to be my inspiration for the game? So what was kind of the impetus for kind of getting 3-2-1 Action going and turning it into what it is now?
The pandemic, and a lot of therapy, actually. I've always wanted to write. I never had the focus. And there was times where I genuinely didn't have the focus. There was times when I got down on myself and made myself believe that I couldn't do it. Like, I have been, being a musician, being a performer, like, able to go out there and able to go put on a show, and I've been doing it for decades. But when it comes to sitting down and like having to write something, like I just couldn't bring myself to do it. I would go, George, the co-creator and the co-writer of 3-2-1 Action, my partner in the business, we would go to Gen Con, we would go to all these writer symposiums. I'm like, this is going to be the year. And it was never the year. And it was years before I actually did it. Like, I've told the story before, but like my grandmother passed a bunch of years back. My grandmother's my number one special lady. And on her deathbed, like, just try to wrap your head around this. This is your special. It's grandma. Grandmas are special people, right? You were there. You're having one last conversation before she goes. And she looks at you dead in the eye and she says, you need to write. And I was like, all right, now, Grandma, I'm going to write. But she said, no, your future is in writing. Promise me, you need to write. And I'm just like, well, no pressure, because
Right.
like, this is the last thing you're ever going to say to me. But you're telling me that I need to do the thing that I've been like kind of putting off and kind of like scared to do for so long, and just to finally own it and do it. So it still took years. It took a lot of years, but like, I worked through a lot of stuff in my life, and I got to a point where I was like, fuck it, it's now or never. The world has ended, as we knew it. The world as it was ceased to be for a while. So I was like, fuck it, I'm going to do this. And I can say the F word, right? I've been saying it.
Oh, fuck yeah. Yeah,
Liberally.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just realized I should have asked that before I came on, but
Yeah, no
I finally just did it, and I played so many RPGs, been doing the show for so long now. To be a little point of clarity here, I don't know much about the history of RPGs. I just play them. Like, Stu is the guy, he wrote the book, but I talk to him about the RPGs. I talk to different people. I try to play different types of games, and I wanted to create something that was kind of an even playing field for everybody, because I ran a lot of D&D and other games throughout the pandemic. Like, I ran like Chill, I ran Call of Cthulhu, I ran Monster of the Week, I ran I think I ran a Zweihander game one time, I ran Honey Heist and a bunch of other small little games like that, and I ran it for a lot of people who never played RPGs before. And the common denominator was, the thing that prevented a lot of these people from playing RPGs was like, it was a barrier to entry, because when they think of like Dungeons and Dragons, and I'm not shitting on Dungeons and Dragons, I love Dungeons and Dragons.
We shit on them all the time. It's okay if you do.
Yeah, but you know what? Like, I try to be mindful that like, that's what someone loves, and whether you're a veteran player who's played it for so many years, and you see all the flaws. That's someone's thing. So I try to be excited for everyone if that's your thing, because I'm going to be your big cheerleader and support you in that. But the common denominator was that people saw the book as a hurdle, because they're like, we want to play this game, but like the book is 300 pages. And I'm a dropout of college several times. And like, I get these books and they're like 300, 400, 500 pages. And I'd be like, I can never do this. But yeah, I'm in the player's handbook, reading it and loving every minute of it. But I recognize that, like, everyone learns in a different way. Everyone experiences games in a different way. But the floor of it all is like, man, that's a thick book.
Yep.
And also, what I experienced, I'm a pretty loose dungeon master, but what I experienced with a lot of these players was like, they had the idea of what they wanted to do and found the rule sets to be kind of limiting. But not for me, because I'll let you do whatever the hell you want, as long as you hit a certain number, don't care, because I want you to have fun. To me, the most important thing is people having a good time. So, I was doing that. I was thinking, like, try this out. When I first started doing action, George wasn't a part of it. George is my best friend in the entire world. We played music together for years. Been my partner in a lot of weird, like, side businesses. Like, we were fixing Xboxes for a while. Like, he was doing the work, I was bringing the clients in, because I don't know if you're familiar with the old Xbox 360s. They would red ring. So, like, it was a constant problem for everyone we knew. So I'd find him, he'd fix him. It was a thing.
There you go.
But I've also played D&D with him from the time I started playing D&D. So I started working on it by myself, and I didn't want to bring anyone into it or do anything, because I needed to prove that I could do it. So I came up with this rule set. I wrote what would become Escape from Point Nemo, right? And so I brought it to him, and it was going to be like a D100 style system where, like essentially like a generic role-playing Call of Cthulhu style system. And he's like, well, you really want to make it easy for everyone? Yeah. Okay. He's like, well, why don't you drop the 0 instead of a D100, make it a D10? And I was like, yeah, it made the most sense in the world to me. I was like, but, because that's our dynamic. Like, I got to push back. And like, but it helped. He comes back, we go back and forth, and we make magic. But I was like, but people like to roll different kinds of dice and this and that. He said, yeah, but like, think back to those tables where we played with this one guy. Great dude. However, he could never figure out which dice to roll. And like, in D&D, what's the dice that you roll more than any dice? The D20, right? So it was his turn always. He's like, which one? I was like, it's the D20. Like, this is the one. You don't have to roll either weapon once. He kept like looking down and seeing 7 dice and being like, it just wasn't for me. So we were like, well, what if everything ran off a D10? And George kind of came up with this concept of subtracting and adding, where everything was kind of based off of rolling the D10. And I love the idea because, everyone learns differently, and everyone has a different kind of experience with the things that they learn and encounter. However, it's a broad generalization, I know, but when you go to school, you learn how to do your ABCs, your 1, 2, 3s, right? So most people can count to 10. And so what we did with 3, 2, 1 action was we made the penalties and the bonuses a 1, a 2, or a 3, either a plus or a minus, depending on what it needed to be. So you are only counting to 10 at max and adding and subtracting a 1 or a 2 or a 3. There's no different modifiers for everything. There's no variations of like, oh, but it's this, but it's that, but this one does this, but this one does that. And like, no, you roll a single D10. You will add or subtract a 1, 2, or a 3, and that goes to the dice roll. And then you have to hit or roll below your stat. That's it. In combat, everything automatically hits. You will roll to see what your damage is and subtract or add whatever the bonus or penalty is. And so the idea was you have 6 stats, like most role-playing games, but they're more or all-purpose stats.
Yeah, they're a little. It is a little different. It's like more 4 and 2 than 6, kind of even.
Yeah, because the idea here is like you would say like Cthulhu, and I love Cthulhu. Again, I'm not shitting on anyone's game. Fucking love Cthulhu. However, bringing someone new into it, they see this character sheet with like 40 different things you could do, but you only have a certain percentile to do the things that you want to do, right? So what we did was the action stat is your basic stat. You would roll, for most things, you're going to roll action, and if there's something that is out of your purview that you think your character would normally do, and you don't like the penalty, I'll say, hey, fill the plot hole in 2 sentences. Tell me why you can do this, right? So like you find a motorcycle. In other games, you're going to have to hope that you can roll a certain thing to be able to ride this motorcycle. Here it's like, well, it's going to be a +2 to your action. Or fill the plot hole in 2 sentences. How can you ride a motorcycle? And the player will go, oh, well, one summer I went to stay with my cousin and he used to take me out in the field and we rode dirt bikes. My mom hated it. Done. You can ride a motorcycle. Huzzah. That's it.
Yeah.
Keep it simple.
I mean, when I was first reading 3, 2, 1 action, like that, everything you're saying is exactly what it struck me as. Is like, this is a really, really great intro tabletop role-playing game. Like, it's so, like, it's simple, but in like a clever way, not like it's not enough. Like, it's everything you need, and everything you can do with it. Like, there are bigger, more complicated games that at their core use the same things. It really almost feels like you took something like Call of Cthulhu and just stripped it down to the core of what makes it work, and then that's the system that you have. And it's clever, it's clean. I really enjoyed it a lot. What was the impetus to give it this kind of like action movie kind of feel to it, other than like 3, 2, 1 and like obviously like bits and pieces of it kind of falls into the story a little bit to go 3, 2, 1 action? Was that it just kind of fell into it, or did you want to bring in this kind of like movie cinema a bit to it?
No, from the jump street, I wanted to bring in movie cinematics. I wanted to tell great stories. I had a lot of story ideas, and my little sidestep to actually having to write a book is that I could tell these stories and give you the framework for the stories, and then let you tell the stories. One of the things that I fell in love with RPGs is that like the communal storytelling aspect of it, and trying to get people pumped that they leave the table feeling like they went to a movie or haven't had a good time. Like I'm 43. I grew up in the golden age of cinema in the 80s and the early 90s. And I love action movies. I love horror movies. I love all types of movies. And, I just wanted to try to bring that feel and that excitement to the tabletop for people to play. Like for me, especially, I think that one of the things that I've experienced in other games is the NPCs are kind of just there. They don't actually do anything. So we wanted to give the NPCs a little more vibe and a little more something to do. So in these 3, 2, 1 action ventures, you are essentially playing the movie. You're in the movie, and the NPCs are there to kind of fill in the story points. So you're going to learn about things on your own, and then the NPCs are going to do the rest. They're there essentially at checkpoints or at the end of episodes, beginning of episodes. They're there fighting alongside you, but they're not actually affecting the outcome of the combat. You just don't forget that they're there,
Right.
And they help the story unfold. Like you can still explore, you can still go your own way with it, but at the end of an episode, this happens, and that leads into the next thing. Start of the episode, this happens, and then whatever happens in between is you and your friends doing the thing.
Absolutely. And then you continue that kind of simplicity throughout the entire thing. Like you said, so it's D10 roll under for everything, and at its core, the challenge is like 1, 2, 3. Basically, you roll. If it's relatively easy challenge, just add 1 to your roll. If it's mid difficulty, it's 2. If it's high difficulty, it's 3, and you still just have to roll under the stat that you have.
Yeah.
Super simple, super easy. Like you said, the 2 sentences to basically fill in wherever you need, which, as someone said in chat, like, it's a great way to incentivize like emergent narrative. It's not just there, you explain all of these things, which gives you the ability to do things you're doing. Even down into the backstory, where it's just like, I just want 3 sentences. Like, I've been given, I can only imagine someone has given you like a 10-page backstory before, and you're like, here, read my novella so you understand my character. I'm like, well, if you write everything your character ever did and what they're going to do, you're not really like you're just like filling in the story you've already done, right?
Yeah.
But with this 3 sentence thing, it's really just, at its core, who are you? What are you doing? And then let's tell a story with that, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that there's any right way to play a game or right style of play. I know that there's constant discourse where people are like, no, it's this, or no, it should be this. It's like, no, man, or there's a good system or a bad system. It's whatever you are happy playing is the best system in the world. And if you enjoy that style of play, you're a player who likes crunchy. You're a player who's like, well, I like rolling percentiles, and I like, that I have to like do weird math for like these mechs or whatever. Dude, that's awesome. If you're like, no, I want to roll a 6-sided die and call it a day, that's awesome too. I think, to me, one of the greatest games ever created is Honey Heist. Like, I think it's a perfect RPG. And there's nothing to it. You're a bear, you wear a hat. That's it. I'm not, forget, there's nuance to it, I know, but like, that's at the core of it.
Yeah.
Like, you play Honey Heist to be a bear wearing a hat and go on a heist.
Absolutely.
But I think that, I think that's just as valid as a game where the rule book is 300-400 pages. What we wanted to do, though, was we wanted to keep it simple, because I also think it's important to give people the ability to not have their characters be forced to be so static by having this elaborate backstory. Because you're right. I think you summed it up perfectly. Everything you've done or will do, it's there. Like, now, like, you could become your character more by playing through it and having things happen and give them reason, give them like things that are emerging from the scenario that really makes their characters whole. Another thing that we did was, talking about the dynamic of rolling under the stat, we do luck points instead of hit points, because in a movie, what happens? You get beat up, and things that should not work end up working because you get lucky. So you start with a set number of luck points, say like 20, right? Luck points are for things that make you bleed. Guts points are for things that, cause you bodily harm. So if you run out of luck, you die. But if you make a roll where you're like, oh, I'm swinging from vine to vine, I slip, you look down, and you're like, well, that's a lava pit. I could either spend 3 luck points to make my roll, or I could see what happens when I fall in this lava pit. So there are things that are going to fight you and attack you depending on the game, but also you are going to spend your own luck to be able to survive. So I've had people who come to the end of a combat with like 1 luck point left, but they didn't actually fight more than 2 things. It was just, they just rolled so poorly, but they knew the risk reward part of it. Also, at the end of every episode, which consists of 3 or 4 scenes, you get to roll a d10 to get that many luck points back. Right? I've had players who rolled well, did good in combat, and by the end of the night, going into the boss fight, had 40 luck points, because at the end of the episode, they kept getting, because there's no max to luck points either. Because in a movie, you can keep getting lucky, right? So you want to push your luck, but not too far. Guts is for like twisting your ankle, falling down a flight of stairs, getting into a car accident, a really bad hangover, things that won't necessarily kill you per se, but you rack enough of them up, you're going to have a problem. So if your luck points run out, you die. If you get 3 ongoing guts penalties, all of your stats drop by 1, because it's going to be harder for you to do the things you want to do because you're beat up. 4 guts penalties, you die. So there's 2 great ways to die. 3, 2, 1 action.
So like we were saying, the game is at its core, it's very, very simple, but the luck mechanic, I think, is the best thing in it. I love what you just said about the mix of, it's both your health and your ability to alter outcomes, because anytime that you can put in like choice design into it and really give people this like reward now for risk later thing, it's just such a clever way to make people think about what they're doing and keep them invested in the system. It's really enjoyable. I can't state it enough. It's a great way to do it, and the fact that your health is a resource you're using on top of the damage you take is great. Now, since everything always hits, was there an inspiration to that? Because I know Into the Odd does kind of like a everything always hits kind of thing, or is that just kind of what you want in the system to just be like, you're doing cool stuff, so we're just gonna let you do it, and just it's more about the outcomes?
That's kind of what it was. It's like, well, if you're gonna do it, do it. You know, like there's no real reward, I think, to rolling to hit something, because ultimately, what you want to do is you want to do this cool thing, and maybe the cool thing that you're going to do doesn't necessarily involve like having to be in front of something hitting it. You know, the real thing is rolling damage, which is the more important aspect of it. And honestly, say if you have a handgun that has a -3. So the damage you could ultimately do with a handgun is 1 to 7 points of damage, right? But you roll a 2 on your D10, then you effectively do no damage, and that's a miss, right? And that gives it the more of a, you still can miss, but you essentially are missing because you're not rolling damage.
Right.
So, you know, George's brain is phenomenal. He is really paramount to the success of the rule set, because, you know, I came out with a bunch of ideas, and then going back and forth with him, he tweaked a lot of stuff. And so, you know, we initially had a thing you had to roll to hit, and then, you know, you rolled for damage. But he's like, you know, we're trying to make this really easy, right? We're trying to make this really cinematic. Why do you need to roll to hit? You know,
Right.
If you don't roll enough damage, you miss. So we try to make it as elegant and easy as possible. So that's why everything runs off a single D10. And also, you know, there's no initiative. You go as a group, you know, and yeah, you could totally fly solo. You could totally, you know, do your own thing. But if you want to do a cool thing with your buddy, like your buddy throws a propane tank in there and you shoot it, or like, you know, you want to do a doomsday device like the Legion of Doom, or like, you know, fastball special like Colossus and Wolverine, you can do that, you know. Certain stunts are you got to roll, but for the most part, like if there's damage to be done, you just roll the damage. But you tell the game runner, that's what we call the person who runs the game, which is the game runner, what you want to do, and you make it so with one roll.
And then, like you said, it's a great idea. If, like, I imagine everyone just kind of being like almost talking through the almost scene, where each round of combat can almost feel like a scene or a slice in it, and it's like, as a group we do all of this, so it's like, okay, you all want to do all this, these are the roles you have to do for all of those things, let's see how the scene plays out, and then bad guys go, and it just keeps furthering that kind of narrative with the cinema that you keep going. And like you said, it's an action movie. The good guys make their shots, good guys do the things that they're going to do, and it's and without it to hit roll with just the damage, like you just said, it just keeps it super, super elegant. You know, you just do the one, you get the things, you go for it, and it's great. I mean, if you try to think about a way to put it to hit roll in there, it all it feels is like clunky and complicated. You know what I mean? Versus how you have it, which again, clean, streamlined.
Yeah, I mean, the idea. Oh, forgive me. You go first.
No, I'm sorry. No. Go for it. The idea is what? Speed
is king. Right? In any RPG, speed is king. Like, you only have so much time to play. And clunky trying to hit is just gonna gum up the works. There's no initiative in 3, 2, 1 action. It goes, good guys go first, bad guys go second. Unless it's a specified trap, we do turns. We call them turns instead of rounds, because, you know, when you think of most people's first gaming experience is a board game. So, you know, it's your turn, it's your turn, it's your turn. So good guys go first on their turn, bad guys go second on a specified trap. You don't have to roll to hit, but it does keep it moving. By taking out that roll to hit thing, everyone's turns go faster. And you're able to get through, like, you know, Rocket to Russia, you could probably get through in about 2.5 hours. Our one shot, any kind of one shot that we do that's not like a full adventure, probably get through in about an hour, hour and a half. And that's enough bite-sized gaming for people who are not able to sit at a table for 4 hours, but they're still going to be able to walk away with that great experience of like, oh man, we had a blast. I got like so much done in like no time, and then go tuck the kids in.
Well, like I said, I mean, Into the Odd, the first time I sat down and played that, and it's similar in that there is no to hit roll. Like you do the thing you want to do and you just keep going. One of the things about that shocked me first was just how fast it is. Like you go through, and that's a little bit different because that game is to me, it's not a combat game. It's an exploration game that has a little bit of combat thrown in. So like the to hit roll not having it, this feels different in that it's less about get through the combat, get back to exploration, and more about do the fun things you want to do in combat, do the cinematic bits, do the cool action scenes, do the slow-mo, and then see the consequences and do the damage and stuff like that. I love when games mechanics continue this like almost like feedback loop into the vibe of what it's supposed to be like. And that's one thing that I felt reading through the entire thing is if you see 3, 2, 1 action, it's got some type of like movie thing involved with it, and then everything you go through from the scenes to the way it works to even luck and all those kind of things, it just continues to reinforce this vibe all the way through, which to me is what really makes a great game, is when you don't feel like this bit doesn't quite feel like it belongs. Like I get why you put it in, but it doesn't quite. It just doesn't feel like there's anything the whole way through this that doesn't, again, just kind of feed that loop back in. So yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
And you're much nicer than I am to some of the games. I'll shit on some games. I won't do it right now, but I think one of the issues I started with 5e, and now I hate it. But I used to run intro sessions. I started a meetup. I had like 300 members in the meetup. We would do like bi-weekly sessions where I would teach new players how to play D&D, right?
Yeah.
It's like a 2.5 hour process to teach 5 people how to play D&D and do 1 round of combat. It's a lot. And an hour and 15 minutes of that 2.5 hours is just teaching people how to fill out the character sheet. One of the things that it's a lot. I think one of the things that I think the discourse on it has kind of died down a little bit more is that D&D is a good intro game. It's really not. Like it's good from like a social perspective because people, especially now with media and Stranger Things and all that stuff, a lot more people know it. It's more in the social zeitgeist. But as actually playing a game, it's not a great intro game. It's really complicated. The style of it is more like, let me tell you all the things you're allowed to do, and if I don't say you can do it, then you can't kind of style. Whereas, as I said before, this kind of game is, in my opinion, even for all of those people that might eventually love the crunchy bits and might eventually love rolling 18 different dice and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I feel like this is a great intro game that gives you all of those things in a very small, bite-sized, simple way. And if you like, well, I really love the math and I really like that, you can be like, okay, well, here's a little bit mathier game. But as an intro game, honestly, this goes right to the top, like, probably 2 or 3 games that I would use to introduce people that have never played before. Yeah.
Wow.
It's simple, it's clean, it's elegant, and it gives you everything you want. Like every bit of tabletop role-playing game you get from this in a simple way that just makes it easy to, like I said, start. And not even that, like, but it's not like this is just a gateway to like a bigger game or something like that. This is in and of itself a great game by itself, which is also fantastic. So I would honestly put this right up there with like one of my go-to intro games, honestly, is Maze Rats from Ben Milton. And one of the reasons I really enjoy that is the dice roll, the same kind of vibe. When you roll your 2d6, your damage is just what's left over. You just roll the one time. You know what I mean? After you go over the armor. And also Ben Milton writes for 5th graders. That's who his playtest audience is for, is his 5th grade class.
That's awesome.
Yeah. But outside of that, honestly, this is right up there for me. If I was going to ever start a meetup again and introduce people to ttrpgs, this is what I would go with.
Dude, I can speak for myself and Gio when I say thank you. That is like the highest praise.
It's a good game, man. And not only 3-2-1 action, we now have your shirt says it a little bit. 321 horror
Our business.
is the horror business recently came out. The Kickstarter funded. It was about is it 2 weeks ago now that it wrapped up?
About a week and change. Yeah.
So you're doing something a little bit different with that one. So tell me about the project that just happened a little bit.
So, we want to try to keep things fresh. And when we started 321 Action, we did Rocket to Russia, which was supposed to be a zine for Zine Quest. And we goofed up and wrote like 100 pages and change. And then we followed that up with Escape from Point Nemo, which was the actual story that, I set out to tell. And then George was like, hey, buddy, let's do a prequel for the Zine Quest. It'll be short, but it wasn't. And then we wrote Escape from Point Nemo. And then we were supposed to do horror as the follow-up to Escape from Point Nemo. But we did a Kevin Saves Christmas, which was a Christmas adventure that we gave to all the backers for free. And then we did Grounded for Life, which is a pamphlet. And George was like, I know I'm in the process. He's writing the horror story. He's like, I'm in the process of writing the horror story. He's like, but he's like, I kind of want to do Mad Max. What do you think? I was like, you had me at Mad Max. And so we did a vehicle battle RPG. It's a full-on vehicle battle RPG. Children of Whom would Kickstarter in the spring. It's going to be in the backers' hands shortly, but it is and it's a little bit of a long road before we get to hard, but it's going to be honest to God, you are kids in 2060 Kansas. The Amphicora from Point Nemo have waged a war on all the coasts, trying to take over the world. There is a post-apocalypse kind of happening, and you kind of been left to your own devices. And so it's Mad Max meets the Warriors with teenagers and electric and carbon-powered vehicles. And you are literally you're fighting in cars, you're commandeering vehicles, all of that stuff. So it's an honest to goodness Mad Max experience. There's 32 playable vehicles in the game. There is 6 playable characters, 20 NPCs, all have their own stats, all have their own abilities. It's like a full-fledged vehicle battle RPG. However, the rules for it are 2 pages. They just stack on top of the 321 Action rules as they are, because we don't want to create a thing where you need to learn a laundry list of new rules to be able to play a 321 Action adventure. So every kind of new style of movie that we make, the rules will just nestle right on top of the rule set as they are. So there are vehicle battle rules for this. And also we were gonna, part of it we're giving people who backed 321 Action's Children of Uma was going to be a bonus little zine for Mini Sub Mania, which is now you fight in these mini subs underwater. And that turned into a full book as well. So you're gonna get a bigger bonus book with this as well. But finally, we were going to do horror in the spring. George has got this crazy idea for a horror game. However, Zine Quest came back around, and I was like, this is a good opportunity for us to do an actual zine. So I had a story called The Devil in New Jersey, which is a found footage horror RPG, which is something, I mean, plenty of horror RPGs out there. I've never seen a found footage one before. And we have some horror rules, which I think is going to be like a page of horror rules, which is like a Final Girl rule, which is going to be a rule where this to determine how many minutes in real time a monster is going to take to show up, stuff like that. And it's going to be a lot smaller in scope, because like most horror is at its core smaller in scope. When you think about you only have like 3 or 4 people involved and there's something chasing them, or like a house with an entity with the family. Like it's, that's why, like, when you look at the budget of a lot of movies, a lot of horror movies don't, they don't need that same budget, because there's no cars exploding. It's, it's you versus the elements, or you versus something elemental, or the house, or a singular creature. But that's what this is. I love horror movies. I didn't used to. When I was a little kid, I scared shitless. But I grew to love them, and I kind of find horror as like my comfortable space, especially with, like, you know, over the last decade where, you know, the world's been going in the direction it's been going in, the pandemic, everything. Like, I found solace in horror because I could either watch goofy ones that'll just let me shut my brain off and, you know, I'll be able to laugh and enjoy myself, or, you know, then I watch really scary ones that, like, you know, shake me out of whatever anxiety I'm feeling at the time. So I wanted to kind of try to relate that to, you know, I live in New Jersey, and I think New Jersey is the greatest state in the entire world and the best place to live on the planet. So I always try to bring things back to New Jersey. So it's the Pine Barrens, it's the Jersey Devil. Um, Wackiness ensues.
I actually used to live outside of Philadelphia, on the main line. So I've had my fair share of trips to New Jersey. We used to spend the summers in Sea Isle all the time in South Jersey. Jersey's a place. It's definitely very interesting. I'll say it's one of the most interesting places I've ever been. But with 3-2-1 horror and this like found footage style RPG, obviously you're bringing your core roots from Jersey into the game. The game still revolves around, it's still around teenagers, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's you play a group of kids who have a horror punk band called the Burbalimes. And Riley, who's the main NPC in the game, um, his parents died when he was young. There was a girl who lived next door named Leanne, who, when he was getting bullied, because it takes place in 1993. So, you know, he's getting bullied and people are just being cruel to a kid who just lost his parents. She was the only one who stood up for him. She's the only one who had his back. And through the years, became like his best friend, and they drifted apart when they got to high school. The night before prom, in 1993, her and 3 other kids go missing, and it turns into this whole thing. So he's getting chased about a week later by the bullies, stumbles into the woods, which people in the town he lives in, it's a fictional town called Hellridge, are really forbidden to go into the woods. Like, you just don't, it's just a thing you just don't do. But he stumbles into the woods trying to escape these bullies. He finds a handheld video camera and he opens it up and he sees a video in there that says prom night, and he, you know, takes it because he's like, well, maybe it's like some weird porno someone made that in the town or whatever. But he pops it in and he sees these kids who went missing in the woods, and he watches it, and ultimately the last shot is he sees Leanne getting dragged into the woods by what looks like the Jersey Devil, you know? So it starts off with you and your friends having to call your parents. You got to make charm checks to call your parents to convince them that you are staying at someone else's house that night. So you're setting it up. Then you have to sneak into the woods after dark, and you got to try to, you know, you're using the found footage to locate the spots where the kids were on the course of their night before they went missing, to try to find them. Because Raleigh's like, look, Leanne's the only person who ever had my back. I have to have hers. And if there's a chance I could help her, I have to do this. So Riley's the NPC. You play members of the Burbalang, you're a horror punk band, you're a bunch of kids in 1993, and you're trying to find this missing girl. So it's different. It's different than the normal fare where you find like a bunch of automatic weapons around an island and have to fight fish people, you know?
Right. Yeah, a little different. A little bit different. And what's the was there a reason between Children of Uma and Devil in New Jersey where the teenagers are the core, or is it just the story you wanted to tell felt best as those at that age where they're like, you know, burgeoning human beings and stuff like that? Was there a specific like desire to tell a story from a teenage perspective, or did it just kind of happen between both that just felt like the right way?
A little column A, a little column B. You know, one of my favorite things in the world is kid adventure movies. You know, you can't see it off screen, but there is like an autographed Monster Squad poster, like right off screen. You know, I think that there is this thing that resonates with a lot of people, especially, you know, people who are older in gaming, where like you had this moment where you remember being a kid where like the whole world was in front of you and you're willing to take risks. You're willing to do what you got to do to survive. and also like you have that spirit still in you. It's not, it's not been beaten out of you by life yet. So like, like the kid adventure thing is great because there's no. I think it really plays well with the concept of action because there's no like, well, maybe I shouldn't do that. It's like, well, why the fuck wouldn't I do that? Like this is what we got to do. We're gonna get the man together. We got a plan. Let's go. But that's it's not always going to be kids, but it's kind of more fun to play as kids, to be honest with you. Rocket to Russia, you're a wet works team essentially sent by the U.S. government to an island. Escape from Point Nemo, you play people in their mid-20s who are, and some people who are older. You have the captain of the ship is 52, if I remember correctly. And you're a documentary film crew going to film a documentary that runs afoul of this island. Grounded for Life, which is a solo play adventure. You play Captain Gale's grandkid and have to break her out of a nursing home for one last adventure. The Hotel Exorcist, which is a solo play pamphlet adventure. You're playing a dude in his mid-30s who is, his job is to go to hotels, motels, bed and breakfast, and excise the unwanted guests. So, it's, the big thing that we did was it was a kid adventure, but this one is also just, it kind of writes itself as a kid adventure.
Yeah, I mean the story in itself because it's a very different adventure when you're teenagers or prom night and stuff like that going into a woods than when you're a group of adults tropping through the woods. I think even the concept and the idea of not knowing what's out there as a teenager is much scarier and bigger and open than when you're an adult. So yeah, I think it's a great idea to put it as kids, because imagine something like, it's horror, but there's still action and adventure kind of feel to it. Maybe I'm completely wrong, but that's how it feels a little bit. Yeah. But I feel like if it's all adults, the adventure almost kind of goes away, and it kind of lends a little bit self towards more horror, because I feel like the wonder kind of disappears a little bit, because you can still have wonder in horror. I mean, the Goonies had some scary parts. So it's not, I mean, you know what I mean? But so that campaign just recently ended. But you still have Children of Uma going. You now have this going. Do you have plans for something after this even? Or are you taking a break to get those two things out before? Or is it just going to be continuous?
We're always working on something. But like, as things happen, the cool thing, a lot of people I think have this misconception of RPG companies. I live in a basement apartment. It's adorable. You can't see it all, but it's very well decorated. It feels loving and cozy. But like, I'm not, and George is not, like, we don't have staff. It's just me and George. Just me and George, and the artists we hire, the editor we hire. Shout out to Megan, she's the best. Our layout friends, Cheese, and everybody. Like, most RPG companies are one or two dudes doing most of the things themselves. And there is the aspect of it that's a lot of work, but it also the grace of being able to pivot if you want to try something else or do something else. Or like, you may think you have something in the pipe, but you realize that you'd be better suited, allocated your resources and time to something else. We can do that. That's why, like, at the end of last year, he's like, hey, buddy, I want to do something to give back to all the people who backed us the first year. Let's make it Christmas adventure. That we did. We just gave it to everybody for free. And now we're going to update it a little bit for the end of the year and put it up on DriveThruRPG for money. So we're going to do that. We were going to do another book with all the solo play adventures, because we had more solo play adventures in the pipe, getting ready to go. But the scope of Children of Uma and the scope of Mini Submania became a lot bigger. So we kind of needed to focus on that. And then the Kickstarter popped up out of nowhere, like Zine Quest. They're like, we're going to do it again in February, but we're going to do this now. And I was like, you can't pass something like that up, because especially when you're a small creator, like when an opportunity drops in your lap, you have to be able to take it. So we're on the fence whether we're going to kickstart his actual horror book in the end of October. We might push that back to next year. But even with that, we're still planning on just doing a quick little update of Kevin Saves Christmas and releasing that in like November. We have a couple other small ideas. We make the rule book free in PDF form forever because we want people to have access to it. We want people to play it. So now that we have some horror rules, now that we have some vehicle rules, now we have a couple other things, stealth rules. That's another thing that we introduced in Mini Submania. Actually, I'm going to come back to that in a minute, but we got stealth rules now. And so we're going to add to the rule book, which is going to continue to be free, but we have to get the layout adjusted. So there's still going to be kind of updated releases towards the end of the year, but we're on the fence of which the next Kickstarter is.
So two things with that. One, how smart is it's from a business perspective, I think it's so clever to have the core rulebook just be free all the time. Yeah. I mean, on our show, one of the scores that people have questioned, I think, more than anything is we always do a value score. And my rationale for adding value is something that we score a book by is it's an accessibility thing. If your book is too expensive, I can't play it, Yeah. And if you leave the rule book free all the time, it's kind of like you can play Apex and Fortnite for free, but people are going to buy the DLCs and stuff like that because they want to add on to it, right? It's good business model. But it's also great just to get it out there and get people excited about it before you do all these other releases. The other thing that I think was really interesting is we're only in like August of 2022, unless I'm completely crazy. This came out, the first original rulebook came out in 2021, if I'm not mistaken, right? So everything you just talked about, like Children of Uma, Devil in New Jersey, all of these solo pamphlet adventures, Point Nemo, all of those things have come out in less than about a year and a half. Yeah. I mean, you guys are like chugging along, which is crazy. Especially when you said it took years and years and years to even get to a point where you could sit down and write and put it out. And do you feel like there's just as years of backlog is just like dumping out now that you have this thing that you can bite into or
Oh yeah. No, I have a vampire story that I've wanted to tell for years. And I want to say, I was on a trip. It was me, it was George's wife, and a few other friends. I mean, this is like a decade ago at this point. And I kind of came up with the story on the fly. And I tried to write it several times, but I never did it. And I'm like, well, I'm going to get to that eventually, so we got to get this other stuff out. Also, like working with your partner, like George is like, his brain is like crazy. Like his brain is like just always firing on all cylinders, very thoughtful. And so when he comes to me and he's like, hey buddy, I want to try something else instead of like what we're doing, I'm like, fuck it, let's do it. Like I would rather, especially having been in music for years, I think it's important to go with the ideas that people are really excited about in the moment versus trying to, reconfigure something that you're just that isn't there at that moment. So the rule book initially, like my lofty thing was the rule book. I always wanted it to be free, but intended on it being in every single game that we release. So if you just bought one book, you'd always have the rules. So if action wasn't anything but horror is, or like the heist game will be, you always have the rules. As an independent publisher, you find out exactly how much that costs, and you cannot really do that because everything. So I think, he and I got into publishing at the absolute wrong time because everything was expensive. There's supply chain issues. Yeah, it wasn't. So it just wasn't feasible to be able to do that every book. Because I think it's important that everyone has access to the rules. So the compromise was, well, we'll put it on drive-through, put it on every site. It's free forever. And if we keep updating it, the PDF will always be free because we want people to play it. Look, you could, I'm sure there are copies of Point Nemo floating around on some site that probably shouldn't be on it. People are getting it for free. What can I do? It is what it is. However, I think that us giving you stuff for free, like the rule book, there's always going to be pamphlet adventures that are going to be free. There's another free pamphlet adventure coming out soon that you have the option to play this, and maybe you can't afford it right now. Cool. Play it, tell your own stories, have some fun with your friends, and become a fan. And then when you can, you will. I can't, I want people to buy this. I would love for this to get big enough that I can get off of social media and pay someone to do social media and, make enough money that I can keep making books. That's the goal. And I say I a lot because I'm doing this interview, but I can't stress enough, like, how I am not the only one who does 3-2-1 action. It's me and George, but I'm the one that ends up doing the interviews. But like, we don't ever mistake my I for not being we. It's everything we do together. We're even Stevens in this. But like, especially coming up in music, I think it's unrealistic to think that people aren't just downloading your shit, and whatever. What are you gonna do?
But one of the things that you just said is, if someone downloads something you did for free and then falls in love with it, the odds of them then becoming a fan that wants to support you increases. So you can't Metallica Napster everything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So having the rule book always accessible, always free, especially in the digital world, especially in 2022, especially like you just said, with I think anyone in this scene or anyone that has any hint of this scene understands, or back to Kickstarter the last like 2 years, understands that the publishing, printing, shipping, all that stuff is just fucked. And some people really like digital. I think digital is really accessible for people, especially with screen readers and some other issues. There's a lot of ways that makes it super accessible. Just having it always on Drive-Thru-RPG is just good business model. A lot of the biggest games out there right now in the indie scene, if you look at things like Merkborg, Mothership, those like that, those games really, I think one of the things that helped them blow up as big as they did is because they supported their community so much. Yeah. And always having the rulebook free. I think pretty much anytime anyone backs like one of the Kickstarter tiers at all, they'll get it anyway, right? As just like a download or access to it anyway. It's just a great way to support your community. It's always a great way to reward them and to create a fan out of it. So regardless, it's a great way to do it. It's a great business model, and I hope it blows up, and I hope that you never have to do Facebook ever again, because I hope we could all just never have to do Facebook again. But
it's exhausting, because that's the other thing. When you're an independent creator, you're also solely responsible for the success of your thing by like constantly putting yourself out there. Like, I remember like being in a band, years ago, like pre-internet, and it was just like, well, you would have to do interviews, you'd have to get in zines, you'd have to do like whatever, this and that. But like, there was a point where, all right, I got to go to band practice, we're gonna go do this show, I'm gonna do this interview, and then I can just go back to band practice. But now it's like you have to constantly be engaged. It's like, hey guys, my band practice. It's like, it's this constant. And it's something I struggle with. Like, I used to be quite honest, I was on, if you look at my backlog of Instagram, I was a traveling salesman, I was a musician, I was doing all this shit, I was constantly engaged, but I never felt lonelier in my entire life, but working through a lot of stuff, I realized that like the people who I really needed to see me, they see me. And so I started breaking away from being so active on social media, because I'm like, the people who really count, the people, they see it, and as I started breaking away from it, the more I was like, God, I don't fucking want to do this. I don't want to promote. I don't want to be like, hey guys, like you see me when I do my Hammer Friends interviews. I do interview a lot of independent creators because I have a decent sized audience, and I feel like it's important to elevate other people and give them the shot to talk about their thing. But I'm like, oh, drove on a ham bone here and blah 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 blah, and it's great, and I can do that still. But like, the constantly having to engage and just be on Twitter and to be on Facebook and to be on Instagram grinds me, man. And I know it grinds a lot of other creators too, but just this is the cost of doing business. But like, going back to the rule book and stuff, and people like playing it, people buying it, I think with PDFs especially, the one downside to a PDF is that when you have to constantly go back and forth in places to find different things, it gets hard, it gets kind of jumbled. So having to run things off a PDF definitely informed the way that we design our books. So now when you are in a section and you are like, a monster pops out, right? So there's not going to be a bestiary anymore. or bestiary. I've heard it both ways, but it's not going to be like, well, now I got to like scroll back up in this PDF and keep jumping back and forth. Now it's like, okay, so here is this encounter and you're going to fight this monster. Well, now I just have to scroll up 1 or 2 pages. The monster's right where it is in the section. It's also a great way to spread your art out in a book, when because art budgets are what they are. And like, this is a good way to spread out your art. In Uma, we have it like, so if you're in an encounter where you're going to fight an enemy vehicle, it's going to be there within like 1 or 2 pages of the section that you're at. Because, we talk a lot about accessibility in RPGs. I love, and I've learned to love them more when I've actually had to run more games and I produce games now, the physical book, because you could just kind of flip back and forth. But even in a physical book, it's cool to just be able to have to go back a page or 2 to find the thing that you're looking for. And so it's, we are re-releasing Rocket to Russia, a shorter version of it as a PDF, and as a physical book, because we did a tier with a hardcover tier in the Kickstarter where you could get a hardcover copy of all the books. So Derek Kinsman, he's a wonderful dude who did the layout for the first book. He's relaying it out, but we're taking the rules out. So it's going to be like a little bit of a thinner book because the rules are everywhere for free. We don't need to put them there now. But he's like, do you want to try to reconfigure everything? I go, no, we're just going to leave this one as it is. But every book after, the monsters are where they need to be. And also with the PDFs, like, I kind of think it's bullshit to charge people extra for a PDF when you bought the book. So we do have PDFs for sale. However, if you go to Exalted Funeral and you buy any 3-to-1 action product, you will also get the PDF with it. It might not be the same if you find it in a store, but like if we sell you this book, we want you to have the PDF. Certain places, as small creators, we don't have the ability to dictate that. But, if you get it on the Kickstarter, you get the book and you get the PDF. You get it from Exalted Funeral, you get the book, you get the PDF. Because they're the ones that really, they distribute most of the books for us. So,
a couple of things that you just said. First of all, like the PDF tools, anyone that watches our show regularly knows that hyperlinks are going to be my legacy. I've got 3 or 4 books, or 3 or 4 different creators have reached out to me and be like, I put hyperlinks in the book because I heard you wouldn't stop complaining about people that don't have it. PDF accessibility in 2022 is huge, like you just said. And being able to just flip that one page or whatever, or being able to have a link that goes where you need to go is huge. And again, one of the things you just said, it's not just about the PDF access. If you actually have the book and it's there, and you can just flip back a page, that's going to be so much better than having like, let's have this book and then let's have this book and let's have this whole other book and it just says go to page here, go to page here. So it's great to hear that, like, even just thinking about the way that the digital book has changed the way you think about accessibility within it, but that also translates to the physical book as well, which is fantastic. And the cost thing, without saying anything, there was this project that came out not too long ago, and I was super excited for it, and it was average priced, and then the PDF was also the same price on top of it. And I was like, I'm not backing this project. I think it looks great. It looks absolutely beautiful. And they're like, well, we want to make sure that people know that the PDF is its own thing. And it's like, it's not. It's the exact same book that you've already laid out that we're paying for. It doesn't make sense. And that's one thing I love about Exalted and a lot of the other small publishers that that put things out, like Redding and Tatty and stuff like that. But Exalted especially has a policy that's pretty much just like, if there's a PDF that exists for the book, when you buy it, you get the PDF for it. It's huge. Again, it's 2022. Some people, I love sitting down, like if I'm on break at work, I love being able to just like pull up a book and just like read through it right on my phone if I need to. I love being able to like pull out my iPad or something like that. I got 3 screens in front of me right now and there's always at least one game up on it. So it's great to have the PDF accessibility. But also, holding a physical book is never going to get old, flipping the pages and feeling those kind of things. So it's, again, another kind of, I don't know, tip of the hat, I don't know how to say it, to the way that you guys are supporting your business and your community to continue to push these things out to people and to help support that. You're doing a great job. It's noticed, it's appreciated, and I hope that, and I think the indie RPG scene kind of has this kind of overall sense anyway that the more you can't fight Hasbro and WotC. Like it's this monolith, right? So the best thing you can do is support your community, and that's the best way it's going to grow. And I think you guys are doing a fantastic job with 321 Action and community that surrounds it.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, we grew up playing punk rock, you know, and if you don't treat the community with respect, how could you get respect in return? How can you get that love back in return? And also, like, you know, we got in with DIY aesthetics and understanding like the importance of, like, you know, like I don't think that any, you know, any independent publisher worth their salt can succeed without understanding the DIY ethos. I've heard it both ways, but you know, it really is handy when it comes to like having to do everything, you know, yourself, and then hiring the people to do the things you can't. You know, we would be nothing without the artists that we work with. We'd be nothing without the people who do the layout. Like, we would just be two dudes like trying to tell these stories. The reason the books look so good is because we get great artists who we love working with, and we have great people doing the layouts. We have like people who like see what we're going for and they appreciate it, and we love working together. But no one succeeds on their own, and I think that's a big takeaway that I had from, like, you know, playing years in clubs and in bars. Like, yeah, you did this, but like it takes a lot of other people to get you to dance, as it were. You know, I would love to write for Wizards, write something, because it's a feather in my cap. It's kind of like, you know, if you're a pro wrestler, you want to go to the WWE for a cup of coffee because, you know, this is something that you grew up with, and it feels cool to be able to do it and say you did it. But like, it's not, my goal is to really grow action. My goal is to really, like, you know, to tell these great stories. I just did a work for hire job for Necromancer Games. I don't know if you're familiar with Planet X, Levi Combs.
Oh yeah, I backed the whole phylactery and everything.
Yeah. He is
Big Eye Chungus. We got the whole thing.
Big Eye Chungus. I did the voice for that. I do the voiceovers and the videos for his Kickstarters. He's my friend. He was a mentor to me coming up in doing this, and you know, he hit me up and he was like, "Do you want to write a Halloween module for Necromancer?" I was like, "Fuck yeah!" So it's like, you know, I'm writing a 5e. We co-wrote a 5e adventure, and that was cool. It's something that I always wanted to do, was write like a 5e or a Dungeons and Dragons, as it were, adventure. And so I did that. But then, like, you know, he's going back to doing the phylactery. I'm going back to doing 321 Action. But one thing I want to say is that, and the thing it's called Heresy of Rot. It really is a nice little Valentine to Hammer Horror. So I think that's going to Indiegogo this week. But one thing I want to say with the DIY thing, I think it's also very important to share knowledge and to not be territorial about sharing your knowledge with people. Because I used to consult. I would get paid to consult on podcasts as like a little side hustle. And now I'm like, I'm kind of retired from like podcasting. I just do the Vintage RPG podcast. So if someone hits me up, I'll help them. You know, as long as I don't feel like they're like an asshole, and that's the key. If you're cool, I'll talk to you about whatever. People hit me up about game design now, and I'm like, yeah, man, just do a Zoom. I'm not charging people for it. There's a podcast called Chiller Queens, which I think is a great name for a podcast. These women just hit me up at my podcasting website, and they're like, could we pay you to walk us through some stuff? I go, nope. I'm just going to tell you, because it's important to share knowledge, because the knowledge that you share, you are going to get back tenfold from other people in the community. Because even if you feel like, and I don't feel like I know everything, I know a fraction, maybe, of what everybody else knows. But when I share, people share back, and I learn more, you know? So my success, George's success, Action success, as much as it is the people that we get to work with, it's also the people who I was able to reach out to and ask questions to before we launched our first Kickstarter, before we printed our first book, before we did that. So, you know, it's important to keep the DIY spirit alive and to not be an asshole. Thank you for coming to that talk.
No, I mean, that's one thing that we've noticed a lot with this podcast. I mean, I started our podcast as a way to God, I back too many Kickstarters, and I have so many books, and I just want to really get a chance to dig through them and like force myself to like sit down and really dig into these things. And we started with that, and it's just been an incredibly welcoming scene. Like there's people like I still like if LeBron James walked down the street, I used to live in LA, it's like cool, that's LeBron James. But when we're talking about being like, oh, we got John McGuire coming on the show, we got Adam Bass coming on the show, like I get this like, all right, these are the celebrities that make me go, like, let me take a breath here. I gotta be prepared for this. I gotta brag to my wife that we got someone coming on the show. And what's interesting is I've had people reach out and just be like, hey, like we're just people, and a lot of us, like you said, we have jobs. We're regular, whatever. We just make these games on whatever, and it's something I'm still getting used to. That people are just regular people, not just my heroes. But the scene is I feel like there is a the good parts of the community are really good, and a lot of people do kind of have that like DIY and kind of like knowledge sharing. The number of people I've been able to reach out to and just have chats with, yourself included, has just been fantastic. So like you said, it's really important, and I'm really glad that at least the little bubble of the scene that I am involved in has really embraced that and really pushed that. So it's been really enjoyable kind of coming into it, because we've only been doing this for, I don't know, it's what, worth, I think this is going to be episode 40. We're newer than a lot of people, and it feels great to kind of come into exactly what you just said, the kind of atmosphere that you're trying to develop. So it's been fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, look, no one's actually cool. Like if you really want to break it down, like there are people who you like think are cool, or like they have the vibe that they're cool, but like no one's actually cool. Like me, like I am a simmering teapot of anxiety who is trying his best not to fart in front of strangers at all times. Like no one is cool. Like you have like the air of coolness, or like someone has the air of coolness is fine, but like real cool is acknowledging other people in the community. Real cool is answering people's questions and being friendly and being nice. And yeah, like, there are people in any scene who are going to try to big dog you, and whatever, to each their own. No grudges held. But like for the most part, man, like, whether you're starting out 40 episodes in, whether, you're 200 something episodes in out of the show, like it's even footing. It's just people doing their best. And that's all you could really ask for, is just people be kind. Just be cool, That's what cool
just be cool. Just be fucking cool. Like it's just not that hard. Just be fucking cool, So 3-to-1 action. We've already talked about, you can get it for free all the time on DriveThruRPG. Where else, can you get all of the things that you've done in the past year and a half? I know we talked about Exalted a little bit, but would that be the primary place that people can find all your stuff?
Yeah, I mean, if you're in Wisconsin, or if you order from Noble Knight, Noble Knight has some copies of Rocket to Russia and Escape from Point Nemo. A lot of the smaller things, like the pamphlet games, are only on DriveThru or Itch, because what the reason why the pamphlet games are taking a little longer to come out is because we're making 2 versions for each game. So you have the print and play version, which you could print and play, or if you're looking at on a tablet, we have a reader version. So like a pamphlet, like right. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6 on the back. So this one is just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it makes it easier for you to read along and play. So digital stuff, go to DriveThruRPG or Itch. If you're an Itch shopper, physical stuff, check out Exalted Funeral or hit up Noble Knight Games.
So people are going to Itch. What is your handle? I guess we call it on Itch. Is it 3-to-1 Action? Is it John McGuire?
3-to-1 Action Games.
3-to-1 Action Games on itch.io, which is fantastic. And honestly, if you're in this scene at all and you don't know Exalted Funeral, you're missing out, and your paycheck is going to be very much spent if you jump onto there, because I can tell you every Wednesday I dread the new items in stock email from Exalted Funeral. I'll tell you what.
Yeah, it's tough, and that's cool, man. I'm a firm believer in all boats rise, and mm-hmm. Every time I see something new coming out for Exalted Funeral, I'm like, this is cool. Like these are people like me who are just like have these crazy ideas, and they're working with some badass artists. And Funeral Camp, mine's folded in the drawer. But like, it's exciting. It's exciting to see other people create stuff, and to see other people do like because that's someone else's dream. Like you're actually seeing the physical manifestation of someone else's dream. What's cooler than that, you know? So
Yeah.
yeah, it's on the funeral. Yeah, it's a very costly habit, but it's a good one.
Yeah,
You know,
they're good people though, and I'll just keep buying. And you know what? Here's the thing: I found if I just keep buying books, we'll never run out of episodes. That's what That's how I've settled in my brain.
It's true, and I've also been encouraging people too to like go in on a game together. Like, money's tight for everybody, right? But if you think about like you want to have a good time with your friends, you're looking for something new to do. Well, like if the game is like $30, everyone just kicks in a few bucks because you don't all need to have it in your collection because you're only going to play it once, you know.
Yeah.
But you all kick in together, then it makes it more cost effective for you to play these games together, especially when it comes with like a big daddy Hasbro book that's going to be like $50-$60.
Yeah, and another 20 for the PDF. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Wow. Like,
but yeah, like you said, accessibility. I mean, accessibility is just a huge part. If I can't afford your game, I can't play your game. So it's huge. Yeah. But listen, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show. I know that, and I've said this before, we originally started talking, and I just assumed that the Devil in New Jersey was going to run for 30 days, and it was 2 weeks when we scheduled this. So I really wanted to be able to push the game a little bit. But regardless of that, I'm so happy that you came on, that we've been able to touch base and stuff like that. It's been a real pleasure talking to you. I know you've done a ton of interviews that I've watched on Instagram. I don't know if it's any different actually being interviewed versus interviewing, but it's been a pleasure. It's been really, really great talking to you.
It's cool. It's cool to be on the other side of it for once. I appreciate you on a Saturday morning after work sharing your time with me and just inviting me on to do your show. So thank you, buddy. I appreciate it.
Thank you. So those that are here, and if you're listening to this either way, again, I don't edit very much on my podcast. You get it raw. This is going to get cut together. Hunter and I, after I take a nap, because as we just said, I just got off work, we're going to wake up tonight and actually go through the 3-2-1 action rule book, dig through all the rules that we touched on here, luck points, the D10 roll owner system. We're going to dig through that entire thing, go beginning to end on the rule book, which is always going to be free on Drive Through RPG. So go check that out. And yeah, so if you were listening, not right now, continue listening because that'll be on in just a second. But again, John, thank you so much for coming on, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Appreciate it.
Bye, everybody.